Right, welcome back to video 10 of our 2D game development series here. My name is Johnny Rush. That's my online handle. My real name is Michael Trippy, of course. But I'm going to go by Johnny Rush from now on. That is a online game handle I use, and a lot of the guys that I play with that are watching the stream right now know me by Johnny Rush anyway, so including some of my coworkers. Anyway, this video is about creating firepower and the ability for our player controller to launch a missile. Now, I sort of jumped ahead. I know I said I was going to do all of this online, but since I last streamed a little bit 2 hours ago, I couldn't step away from it, so I kept working on it. And so here's what I've done so far. I've created a missile.png graphic, and I believe let's see what the properties are on that. Okay, so it's a 64 by 128 are the dimensions, just a small PNG file. So I created that, and then in Unity I created a game object called spawn missile, and it's basically an empty game object. It has no other components other than a transform, and that transform is set. Basically, it's set because it's been reset to 0 for XYZ. It's actually at the center of the game paddle right now, which is kind of where I wanted it to go. And then I created a missile and applied the texture, and I just used a cylinder for that, for the missile, and or it's called a capsule. But anyways, I created a missile object and applied that texture. You know, I moved. If we look at our materials here, you see the missile PNG file has been added in, and I just applied it as a texture to that. So on the missile itself, once it's actually spawned into the game, it's going to propel itself through a script that's been attached to it. You see propel missile script. I had two public properties set up, speed and max Y. Speed is how fast it's going to move in the Y direction upward, and max Y, of course, is the ceiling height of the Y value, because the missile's going straight up. Once you click the left mouse button, it'll launch a missile. And so let me so essentially what happens is when you click the left mouse button, it instantiates a game object based off the missile, and it starts its starting location is where the spawn missile empty game object is, which is the center of our paddle, and it starts shooting straight up from there. So let's look at a couple of the scripts so that you can see how that all worked. Let's go into the propel missile. That's actually pretty basic. I don't think I even need this part. I'm going to take this right out. I don't think I even need it. To be honest with you, we're not using that. It destroys itself. Yeah, so we have the two public variables, speed and max Y, which I talked about. And then all we have is the update function. So because once it's spawned into the world, this update function is called once per frame, and we are increasing per frame, we're increasing the Y value by the speed value. And so we're doing a similar thing like we did with moving some of the other objects. We're getting the current position of that object, increasing one of the components, which in this case is the Y component of the vector 3, and then we're reassigning that updated movement vector back to the transform component of that game object, in this case itself, the missile. and there's an if statement every frame. It's checking if the movement.y is greater than or equal to our max y, which is the highest we want that missile to go, where at that point it's no longer going to hit anything. We call this destroy this.game object, which will destroy basically itself and remove itself from the scene. And so we don't have, initially I was going to just deactivate it where it's not shown in the scene, but then every time a missile is launched, it's creating a new instance of that missile, and it's eating up memory, and then once it's gone, it's gone. So we definitely are going to destroy it at this point once it reaches the ceiling. So that was a simple movement there. And I modified our player controller since we already had some stuff in there to control the player paddle. It was a perfect, the script was the perfect spot to put in basically this right here is really all I added. This is how we capture the left mouse button. It's input.get mouse button down. You pass it a number. 0 would be your left mouse button. 1 is actually the right mouse button, and 2 here, which I have these commented out, would be like a middle click, which would be generally your scroll wheel on most mice is a third button you can push down on it. We're not going to be using those. I commented those out. I left them there in case, if we have a future feature that requires it in this project, we can have it already there. Now a couple of things I had to set up on the player controller that were not there before, and it's basically these two things right here. The first is, first of all, they're both game objects. One is our prefab, and that's this right here, the missile prefab. That's the actual 3D object or the game object that we're going to see as the missile. This other one here is a reference to the spawn location of where that missile should start. And if we go back to Unity, that's going to be the spawn missile right here. So if we look at, click player here, you'll see right here there's 2 additional items that were added since the last time. The respawn missile prefab, that's the respawn location, and so that's the spawn missile. I just grabbed it and dropped it down in there, so we got a reference going into that script. And then the missile prefab, which we created here, this missile prefab, I dragged it and dropped it onto there, so we have a reference to the actual missile prefab that we need to create an instance of when the user clicks the left mouse button. Now, let's go back to our script. Now, initially when I did this, I started to use this one, the find game object with tag. And I was trying to, actually I did use it, but I didn't need to put it there. Let's get rid of that. I'm going to delete some excess code that we don't need. I'm just going to clean this up. Initially, I'm going to highlight this line right here. Initially, I did not have this line right here. By not having that, what it allowed me to do was to continually click. Every time I clicked the left mouse button, I would get a missile being spawned and launched. So I could have multiple missiles. Well, I mean, that's great for another type shooter game that I'm thinking of, or if you need to instantiate various bullets or whatever, multiple, like a rapid fire. But in the original Space Invaders that we're trying to somewhat clone, you get one missile you can launch, and until it either hits something and it's destroyed, until it's actually gone off the screen in some way, whether it hits an enemy or it has to go all the way up the top and you miss everything and disappears. Then that's when you're allowed to actually launch another missile. So this line right here, by adding this if statement, it's going to first check. It'll use the game object, static game object, and it's calling this function find game object with tag missile. If we look back at our Unity where I set up the missile prefab, I created a new tag called missile. And I also created one called spawn missile, which is a tag for this spawn location here. That's right in the center of the paddle. So using those two tags, they'll work in conjunction with some of this scripting code. And the main one being here is that it checks. It's basically checking. This statement here is checking if there's an existing object with the tag missile. And so when you launch your first missile, while it's still active in the scene, it will appear when you do the search with this command. It will actually return back a game reference to that game object. So what this statement is checking is, now if it doesn't find one, it'll return back null, and that's what I'm checking for. If the game object find game object tag with missile is equal to null, meaning it doesn't exist in the scene, then we want to instantiate one. So that line, single line here, keeps us from being able to launch additional missiles until one is gone. So those are the changes. It was kind of basic. It wasn't a whole lot. It was basically just creating the spawn location, creating the missile itself, the game object for that, creating an image to represent that we can apply as a texture to our missile prefab, and then this little bit of code here, putting into publics to pass in references to the spawn location and the missile prefab, and this little block of code right here, which we put inside the update function, which is called once per frame. We're already checking keyboard input from the user through this right here, well, actually through this line. And so it was a great place to put after it, does any movement for the paddle, for the player controller. It checks the mouse. Nothing else was added. That was it. So it was pretty basic. It wasn't a big change. And of course, this propel missile, which is basic, it's just tied to each missile. So let me show you how it works. I don't have any collision detection yet. That's going to be our next little bit. So if we go back here, we've got maximize on play. There we go. It was still compiling. It had the little hand symbol where I couldn't actually do anything. All right, so if we fire, oops, you see it's shooting a missile. Now if I'm continually tapping the mouse button, you'll see it's only allowing one to go, and when that one disappears off the screen, which actually it's a little higher up than where we can see. Yeah, so we can move. We could fire one here. We can move here. I slowed down the paddle too. It was just moving too fast. And you see there's no detection right now. Collision detection is going right through. So that's the next thing. What I want to do is to be able to display I'm going to display hit points on the on the defenses here. So if it's shot from below or above, we may later change it, like I was mentioning about breaking it up into pieces so that we can destroy portions of it. So, I'm really tired, I'm sorry, but I just want to touch base and make sure I put out this video so that there wasn't a whole lot of content that I did not live, but the changes weren't big to make it happen. It was actually a lot easier than I had thought, especially getting used to moving objects around and accessing transforms, and things are going to be moving along quicker. So the collision, we haven't used on collision enter, which we'll be using next. That's the message type we'll be looking for, checking. And so I think that'll be quick too. I don't think it's going to take very long to get that going. See, what time is it now? We've got a little bit of time. We probably could, I'll tell you what, we probably could implement it where it's at least destroying the enemies. We'll just ignore the defenses for now. If it goes through it, it goes through it. But I did want to get it set where the enemies are firing down, but we'll do that last. We'll get our missiles working good for the player, making sure it's destroying enemies, and also that it's somehow if you shoot your own defense towers from the bottom, you're doing damage from the lower part as well. And like I said, I think it'll be easy to implement a new prefab of the defenses with a 9-piece setup. So we could even go. I mean, I don't know. We might do 16. Maybe we do like a 4x4. Do 16 and make it. Since we're going to be doing, I mean, it's not going to take much more effort to go, from a 3x3 to a 4x4, and actually have a little more control. Less, you can show more damage than that. It'll take 16 hits instead of 9, and that kind of thing. So let's quickly do. Let's try the on collision with our enemy. So let's see. So the way we did the collider before, actually we did a trigger. That's what we did. We made like on the missile. Or should we do it on the enemy? I'm trying to think what would be the best way, because it really could be implemented either way. I guess since the missile is what we're launching, let's go ahead and have it be the trigger, the collider. So the missile has a capsule collider. And so I think we're going to have to do this. We're going to set it to isTrigger. And we're going to have to add another script, or actually we can modify that propel missile script and put something in there. Let's see. Okay, since we don't have a rigid body, we don't have to worry about using the fixed update function to do any physics stuff. We can do all this in the update. So sorry about that, dog. So we're going to do void. Well, if we're setting it up as a trigger, I think we have to use the on trigger, not the on collision. On trigger. On trigger enter. I'm going to try to remember this off the top of my head without looking anything up. And so I think we said, like, we did an if statement when we were checking like the type of object that was triggering. So if other dot game object, I think is what we did. Yeah, game object dot compare tag. I think that's what we used. Enemy. So basically we're saying if it's an enemy, then we should be able to just don't tell me it's that easy. We should be able to just destroy the game object, right? Destroy other dot game object, right? That's like really, that seems like too easy. I mean, seriously. And then the other thing we're going to do is, if we don't, we also want to destroy the missile at that point. It can only kill one enemy at a time. If we don't destroy the the enemy at this point. I mean the missile. It's going to continue to destroy an entire column of. So we can do that, something like that. So we've got two destroy statements. One for the game object that it collided with the enemy, and then this game. So, wow, that's pretty simple. If that works, I mean, it seems like it should. Theoretically, it should work. We got the is trigger turned on, and I don't think there's anything special we need to do. We didn't need to add a new script because we just modified this one. Let's give it a whirl. Oops, I didn't move the mouse down. I left it up there and it's hit the play button again and stopped it. I've done that I don't know how many times this evening. Alright, so we go here. We're going to fire. Boom. That went right through. And I think that's because we took on the enemies, we took the rigid body away. That's how it was working before with it. See, the side walls have rigid bodies, and when we move the controller, it triggered into the rigid body, hit it. But we need to possibly just check on the enemy, just check its box collider as a trigger. I don't really know. I'm just trying this, saying that it's trigger as well. So maybe it wasn't as easy as I thought. Nothing is really that easy. No, see, that didn't work. So here's where I start. Let's remove that. Just out of curiosity, we add a physics rigid body. I think we fixed that issue where if we left the rigid body on there, it would still, our game would still work. I mean, it would still work. No. No, 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 no. Oh man, look at everything's just falling apart on us. So no, that's not going to work. So we got to remove that rigid body. That's just not going to work. Remove component. It has to be the on collision thing then. We need to do that. Let's pull up our documentation again. Alright, so quickly let's just look up on collision. I think that's what it was, if I recall what we saw earlier. A simple explosion and collision. Okay. Grenade explodes after a time delay. Public float fuse time. So start, explode after fuse time. Grenade explodes on impact. Void on collision, enter collision, explode. Okay. Well, that didn't really tell us a whole lot. Possible projectile script. Raycast hit. If physics.raycast camera.main screen point to ray. Input that mouse position. What is all this? Out hit. Instantiate. Explosion prefab hit that point. Let's do a Google search as well. Sometimes that'll bring up some examples. How to detect when two Unity game objects collide. Here's collide by name. That's kind of what. Your collision logic in a trigger, enter 2D instead. Huh. Well, let's add another function, because I don't even know if that one's even being triggered. Let's do this debug statement we did before. Debug.log. Triggered. Trigger. Entered. Okay, so we're just going to write, for now, I just want to write that out to the status bar when this is ran, so I can just see if it's even being triggered. Maybe the way I'm checking for it once it's triggered is incorrect. No, I don't see anything there. So that's not working. All right, so hold on a second. All right, so I'm back. So that that's not getting triggered with that on trigger. So let's do private on collision enter. So, and let's say if collision dot game object dot comp compare tag. Actually, let's just do this. Let's just copy this all. Essentially, we're going to be doing the same thing, except instead of other, it's the word collision. And then also let's do a debug statement, debug.log. Collision entered. All right, let's see if that works. Trial and error. Yeah, so that's never triggered either. Let's see, does the enemy need that checked? Let's see. Nope, 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 nope. Okay, let's look at our missile. This is a mesh renderer, capsule collider, edit. So we need to go back to the documentation on this. Okay, if it's checked, you can do those on trigger enter. Apart from these, there are prerequisites to detect collisions. A collider component should be added. A rigid body component should be added. The collision event handling method, like on collision enter, should be used. Okay, so on the missile, we need to add colliders there. Let's add a physics rigid body. Okay. Okay. Something happened there. Why did they just stop going the other way? What? Oh, we got an error. Wait, missing reference exception the option type destroyed, but you are still trying to access it. Oh, okay. So at least we got somewhere. It did destroy the object. That was a good thing. Wow, that is strange what it's doing there. Yeah, we need to do the is kinematic probably. Yeah. Okay, so that seems to be working there. We can continue to fire missiles and it's going. But what's happening here, there's something going on, there's an error. So what's happening is, I know exactly why it's being caused. So how to fix it, though, is another issue. Let's look back at our script here. The spawn enemy right here. See, right here we instantiate this. And so when we're moving the enemies, we create this an array called enemies, and we invoke find enemies, and so it's storing that in an array, and then this array that does it one time only. and then an update. It's going through looping all that, but I really didn't want to do that invoke enemies thing. Or find enemies. I didn't want to call it every frame. But we might have to, because it's a possibility each frame you got an enemy that's disappeared. We need to rebuild a new list of enemies. So maybe we don't want to destroy the enemy. We'll just set it inactive, because there's only a fixed amount of enemies. It's not like it's going to eat up memory instead of destroying it, because that throws a null reference. What's called the null reference. You get an exception error, because it's now pointing to an area of memory that doesn't mean anything. So let's modify this to instead of destroy it, we'll do set let's do game object. I think it's set. Let's do a search. I know it's set active or something like that. Set game object dot set active. Okay, let's see what we have. Is there a here it is, set active activates or deactivates game objects? That's what we want to do. Set active. Why wasn't that not working? I think just say other dot game object. Set active. False. So we just set it. False sets it inactive. But we do want to destroy the missile. Let's see how that works. Yep, that's kind of what we needed. Yeah, it keeps. See, there's still a reference in memory to that. It's just inactive, meaning you can't see it, but it's still in the array as an object. Because it's inactive, it can't collide or do any of that kind of stuff. All right, so we're moving along. We're getting things going here. Okay, that was odd. See how it moved? Wait a minute. It's like even though they're invisible, it thinks they're still there. Watch it move. Yeah, so we'll have to fix that. Then that's not gonna fly. why I think we need to destroy it out of there, but we need to update the list. That's really what we need to do. So let's do this. Make one minor change. Let's go back to the original. And let's see, spawn enemy. So we might need to call this find enemies, is what I'm getting at. So maybe right, let's see, when is, I don't know if we should do it before or after. Let's do it right here. Let's just say find enemies. See if we call it for updating that, if that's going to be a problem. Hopefully not. So really, we want to, regardless whether it's null or not, we're going to want to overwrite that. Yeah, we're going to say enemies equals null, set it to null, and then refine it. So let's hope that doesn't cause any errors. No, see, it still causes some hokey pokey stuff. Anyway, so that's what I want to be working on. I'm going to call it quits tonight. I'm going to have to think about the best way to handle that. Obviously, setting it inactive worked. But maybe it's a combination of refining the list and let's do that. Oh, I just want to try one last thing. So we don't want to destroy the other game object, but we do want to set it active equals false, and then we'll have refined. I wonder if we can remove the, I don't know if we have to remove the tag as well, clear the tag. So when we refine the list, it's not searching objects that are, I'm thinking when they're inactive, they're not in the scene. It's only searching, when you do this, the find thing we have here, where is it? Move enemies. Find games with the tag, it's only active game objects in the scene, so. Determined to get this done. I'd like to finish it out where this is done and I don't have to worry about it. This is like one of those little things that I hate to have hanging. Okay, so that's still working. Obviously, we're calling our find thing. Hasn't failed us yet. Now, what I want to do is see if we can. Okay, so I want to get rid of some of those. What essentially what I'm wanting to see is, will this block go, it should keep moving all the way over to the wall. It should. Did we fix it though or not? I think we fixed it. Because when we refine our enemies, yep, I think we fixed it. Because we're rebuilding that list every frame then, because, and then it's only processing the new ones. And by not destroying it, we don't get a null reference or exception error. Yeah, so this whole row should, yeah, it should keep on going. We might need to readjust, since we're now calling that function. It's having to gather up a list of enemies into an array every single frame. It's taking a little more processing. It seems like it's slowed down just a little bit. And of course, we didn't have the accelerated speed. We talked about doing that. That's something we'll do later on. I just want to get all the collision detection stuff working, get all that working, and we can look at tweaking it to getting it to progressively get faster and faster. Yeah, so that seems to be essentially working. Boom. Of course, we don't have anything to track when there's no more. But the game hasn't crashed. That's a good sign. There's no errors. I don't see any errors popping up on the bottom about an exception, so now I can stop there and feel good about that. So let me write down what we're going to be doing tomorrow. Okay, since we have our missiles worked out, we're killing the enemies, we need to do the reverse. We need to have enemies dropping bombs. We'll call them bombs instead of missiles, so there's no confusion, even though they might look similar. Enemy bombs would be the first thing to create and drop from enemies. Right, and since we got this respawn thing working out on a excuse me, on and again, we got the respawn thing working on with the missiles, where we can continue to respawn them from a spot. You know, earlier in an earlier video, I said I might do instead of doing a 3 live type system where it'll respawn the character player controller, that we would just have it worth like 3 hit points. But I think we can implement a respawn easily now that we're doing it with the bombs. I mean the missiles. So and we're going to be doing it for the bombs as well. So we're kind of going to do the reverse of the paddle. Each enemy will have its own spawn location in the center of where it'll drop down a bomb. So we're getting closer. We're getting there. And then once we got it all working, we'll add the UI to start tracking a score, showing how many lives we have left, that kind of thing. We'll add an intro screen maybe that'll pop up before it goes to the game scene. And so we're going to have to learn how to switch game scenes. How do we move from one game scene to another, like from the intro screen? How do we have Unity launch the gameplay scene, and then to the final end scene? We may do a special end scene, a third scene, instead of just doing a simple you win at the end. We'll just do a little game scene that maybe like a credit screen or whatever. The end you win with credits or whatever, and I don't know, just something just to transition to something different. Maybe it'll be like you want to play again, that kind of thing, which, you know, relaunches the game scene from scratch, or it'll just end and there's no, you know, replaying again unless you. Although we should have that. Most games allow you to replay before they just completely exit. So we made some progress today. We had 3 streaming sessions today. So things are moving along. You can see it takes a little time, especially not knowing a whole lot. But I mean, games in general take time. I can imagine what kind of time is invested in other games that are more professionally done, that, you know, the thousands and thousands and thousands of hours put in by all the staff, the employees, the engineers, designers, programmers, all that, sound effects guys, you name it, graphics guys. It's crazy. Anyway, we're going to call it for tonight. Check back tomorrow. Please leave any comments in the video, questions you might have. Maybe something you didn't understand that needs to be just explained again. Just post them in the YouTube video comment section, and I'll be checking those tomorrow. Y'all have a good night. I know I will. I'm about ready to crash.